Hello, everyone. I'm going to play you an excerpt from the April broadcast of 2024 to see if you have the same reaction I had when I came to a particular part of the talk. You'll know it when you see it. The talk from the April broadcast that I'm referring to is the morning worship text given to the Bethel family by Harold Corcoran. He is warning his audience about the danger of being overreached by the devil. He explains what that means in his talk. His theme text is 2 Corinthians 2:11, which reads, "So that we may not be overreached by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs." Paul is addressing true Christians in Corinth. True disciples of Christ are not ignorant of Satan's designs. However, as you're about to see, that does not appear to be the case with the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses. Harold is referencing the account of a former brother in the city of Corinth who had been disfellowshipped for immorality so gross that even pagans were offended by it, as Paul explained in his first letter to the Corinthians. Now, only a few months later, Paul is again writing to urge them to lovingly reinstate this man because he has repented and stopped sinning. But now he is in danger of being lost to Satan. Why? Why would Paul say that? Because of the great sadness this man was suffering due to being cut off from Christian fellowship. Let's listen to how Harold Corcoran, speaking on behalf of the governing body, wants Jehovah's Witnesses to apply this Bible account.
The expression used in our day's text, the word used is overreached. And what comes to mind when we hear someone that has been overreached? Well, to overreach means to get better of or get the better of, especially by deceit or trickery, to outwit, to overtake, to overpower. And so we have to be very careful at all times because our enemy, the devil, is out to trick us, deceive us, overtake us on any occasion possible.
Okay, the devil uses deceit or trickery to get the better of Christians. So Harold is about to show his listeners a way in which they might be overreached by the devil using deceit and trickery. You remember the devil. He dresses up as an angel of light, and those who represent him, his ministers, dress themselves up as ministers of righteousness. That is also found in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. I know you know it well, but what the heck? Let's read it one more time just to refresh our memories. "For such men are false apostles, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself keeps disguising himself as an angel of light. It is therefore nothing extraordinary if his ministers also keep disguising themselves as ministers of righteousness. But their end will be according to their works." 2 Corinthians 11:13-15. Bear these words in mind, because they will soon be very relevant. Let's listen to what Harold says next.
And eventually, this very man who had been living such an immoral life really repented. And now, permissiveness and tolerating badness was no longer the issue. What was the issue? Now a matter of forgiving such a man. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, we read verse 6. "This rebuke given by the majority is sufficient for such a man. Now you should instead kindly forgive and comfort him, so that he may not be overwhelmed by excessive sadness." And who was behind that ploy of excessive sadness?
Yes, who is behind the ploy of excessive sadness?
Verse 11, "So that we may not be overreached by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs." So the devil will use whatever. The temptation of sexual immorality, being overly permissive, or being harsh, unforgiving, and lacking mercy.
I mean, what the Do they even hear themselves? Notice that Harold says all this without batting an eye. Oh no, my brothers and sisters, we would never want to, how does he put it? Be harsh, unforgiving, and lacking mercy. Are you kidding me, Harold? The governing body now presumes to counsel its flock that it would be harmful and wrong to do something that they've forced Jehovah's Witnesses to practice for the past 60 years. If you're not aware of the extent of this hypocrisy, let me enlighten you. The official practice of the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses for the past half-century has been this. If a witness commits a sin like sexual immorality, fornication, or adultery, and is disfellowshipped, then repents and stops sinning, he or she will not be welcomed back immediately. In fact, it could take years, though it is usually considered that at least 12 months should pass before reinstatement can be granted. Paul's second letter came only months after the first, and yet, even in that short lapse of time, he talked about the danger of losing the man to Satan because the Christians in Corinth were not willing to forgive him. But based on standard practice among JWs, during the entire 40 years I served as an elder, the requirement was for the sinner to sit silently at the back of the hall, being shunned by all, for a year or more before being allowed to return. Imagine how humiliating and depressing that is, so unloving. If the elder body, and I'm speaking from experience here, were to reinstate someone only months after disfellowshipping, they'd be questioned by the circuit overseer or the service desk at the branch. Elders know this to be a fact. The governing body has forced the worldwide community of Jehovah's Witnesses to treat repentant brothers and sisters in a harsh and unloving manner, lacking mercy. Harold's words, not mine. I say this because we're talking about individuals who have stopped sinning and have repented, yet must endure an arbitrary and unscriptural, cruel and humiliating one-year period of punishment. By his own words, Harold shows that those who practice shunning have been doing the work of the devil. And to what has that led?
The devil will use whatever, being harsh, unforgiving, and lacking mercy. Both of those tactics can be very effective in taking Jehovah's people away from their Heavenly Father.
Yes, the harsh, unforgiving, and merciless tactic the devil has used through the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses has kept millions away from their Heavenly Father. In fact, they don't even allow their flock to call themselves God's children, but only His friends. What a sin that is. By his own admission, Harold Corcoran confirms that the governing body has been serving Satan by implementing treatment that causes such sadness that it has driven people to commit suicide. I get countless emails from people who tell me their stories of how they've lost family and friends to suicide due to the harsh, unforgiving, and merciless treatment they've experienced from people who've been indoctrinated to believe that JW shunning is a loving provision from Jehovah. Now Harold is changing that story with not so much as a nod to their past horrific history of abuse. These ministers of righteousness are like the man described in the Bible book of James. If anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, this one is like a man looking at his own face in a mirror. For he looks at himself, and he goes away and immediately forgets what sort of person he is. But the one who peers into the perfect law that belongs to freedom and continues in it has become not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, and he will be happy in what he does. James 1:22-25. I can only guess as to whether these men, these self-appointed ministers of righteousness, are aware, truly aware, of the level of hypocrisy they exhibit in this morning worship talk. Poor Harold. Does he look in the mirror and then go away and immediately forget the sort of person he has become by following the teachings of the governing body? Jesus talked of the blind leading the blind, But on one occasion, the Jewish leaders asked him for clarification. Those of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things, and they said to him, "We are not blind also, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." John 5:40. I doubt very much that the men of the governing body and their helpers would admit to being blind guides. But if not, then what? Thank you for watching and for your support.